What's going on, everybody? Let's talk about Abigail, directed by the Radio Silence team and written by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick. Abigail is about a group of people who were hired to kidnap a 12-year-old girl with the promise of splitting $50 million between them, and essentially all they have to do is babysit her for 24 hours in this insane mansion. However, it was actually a trap and flips the roles of prey to predator. So going into this one, personally I was really excited about it because I really loved Ready or Not and their freshness that they brought to the Scream franchise. The Radio Silence creative team have proven themselves to be masters of blending comedy and horror, which I've always found really hard to do, or at the very least to get right. This movie is based on the Universal Classics monster movie Dracula's Daughter, and while I've never seen this film, I can say that this reimagining of the film was a pleasant surprise considering I'm not really a fan of the vampire subgenre. The cast is a stacked set of actors with standouts for me, including Catherine Newton as this adorable go-with-the-flow role, who is essentially the hacker of the group, or at least one half of it. Kevin Durand, who is the big, strong guy, and honestly, his comedy, while at times leans on his moronic nature, actually was pretty funny a lot of the time. And of course, Melissa Barrera, as she just knows how to be the modern final girl. Yes, she gets plot armor, especially towards the end, but her physicality and investment in the role is so easy to buy that even a weaker performance like this one can't really deny how good she is. I think the titular Alicia Weir did a decent job, especially considering that the bar isn't like insanely high for kid actors. While the late Angus Cloud and Dan Stevens were among some of my weaker points for the movie, for Dan Stevens I really enjoyed the performance. It's just after a certain plot point happens, there's a switch in his character that I just don't agree with, and I found it to be very out of place and abrupt. Apparently Angus had filmed most of his parts before his passing, as most of this film was shot before the SAG strike that happened, so they were able to get most of his parts done before then, and it also made sense why he was the first on the chopping block. But just generally speaking, I think the characters were at their best when they were interacting as a group instead of one-on-ones. This group had the misfortune of dealing with the Scooby-Doo dilemma, where they're great together, but they have to divide up at some point and kind of twiddle their thumbs at times and explore the mansion, and the dialogue is kinetic but disappears in the one-on-one interactions. And this is important because it hurts the pacing, because the beginning takes a bit to get going, but once it hits the reveal, the pacing is pretty good for the rest of it. Hell, to be honest, the last third is actually a bit too fast if anything, but that might just be me. The writing is especially good in the first 2/3 of the film, with minor caveats, but I especially like this scene where it's almost like a character read in the beginning of the film, where the characters using their intuition are basically telling the audience through exposition who these people are, and it works in both ways because it tells the audience a little bit about these characters, but also balanced as good banter between the characters as well. But I found this scene especially important because it also proves to the audience how self-centered these characters are. These aren't the type of people that you're necessarily traditionally rooting for in a movie. The whole enemy of my enemy thing really works for this story because it's a refreshing take on it, and it's unconventional and really appreciated. And something that jumped out right away to me was this house that we're at. It screamed to me how much it resembles the Orphan First Kill house, as well as obviously the Ready or Not house. I felt like externally it reminded me a lot more of Orphan First Kill, while internally it reminded me so much more of Ready or Not. Another thing is the blood and effects were really well done. There's some gnarly gore in this one. Some standouts for me involve the spike towards the end with Joey, the makeup effects on Catherine Newton, not to mention the fact that she fully resembles a Deadite, which was really cool to see. The projectile vomit of blood in a later scene with Frank was really cool, and all the Ready or Not like explosion deaths. One of the issues that you face with a premise like this is that going into it, you already expect most of these people to die, and because none of them are really fleshed out enough with the whole fake names and unwillingness to share about themselves, you never really feel like you know these people, and while that may be intentional, it doesn't help form a bond with these people, so when they ultimately die, you don't feel anything. The effects on Abigail and Sammy were really great, with their teeth resembling shark's teeth, with the layers of teeth on display. I do like that the movie does take the liberty of creating its own rules on what does and doesn't work on a vampire, but that comes with an asterisk as well, because personally I really like the scene where Abigail is dancing with the dead body, and our protagonists are basically able to test out their theories in multiple ways, and we get to see what doesn't work, like for example a cross or garlic. And while I really like that, I'm very much a person of show don't tell, and the scene right before this, they have like this unnecessary conversation basically debating on what does and doesn't work, only to the scene right after this actually try it out, and I just felt like it would have been so much better if they organically tried and said, all right, let's grab all of the things and let's actually try it on Abigail. And I feel like that would have saved some screen time, as well as it would have gotten the same point across as it did in the first place. Like, I get it, you're trying to have more dialogue time with the characters, but the movie's already 110 minutes long, and there's enough comedy sprinkled throughout the rest of the film. You could have cut that out and you would have gotten the same product. Also, this is just a nitpick, but the whole ballerina gimmick gets old pretty fast. Like, there's this scene in the middle of the movie where she's basically chasing Peter, and she has this unnecessary need to do like these like jumps and stuff, and I just felt like, I get it, it's cute in the beginning, but we can move on from it. Her powers also felt so situational at times. Like, for example, she flies like once in the middle of the movie just randomly, where even our characters say this, and she doesn't really ever do it again, nor do they try and have a moment where like it actually proves useful. And in that same vein, her power is a bit inconsistent, because earlier on, once we have the reveal that she's a vampire, she barely can crack a wooden door, and later she can break iron bars with ease. This might just be a me thing, but I didn't really like the ability to manipulate Sammy. It felt kinda lame, despite I really enjoyed the music video they had, where it was like a mirroring thing that they had going on. A small con for me is that the blend of horror and comedy was a bit less balanced here, as I felt it teeter way more on the comedy side. The quips weren't intolerable or anything like that, it just felt like the one-liners were a little too much at times, despite the fact that the tone was consistent throughout the entire thing, which was great. While the premise being pretty simple isn't inherently a bad thing, because of how few things actually go on, there's a lot of scenes of characters just splitting up, eating up screen time, then walking down dark hallways, then add nothing to the value. Like I said, the Scooby-Doo dilemma. You could cut a solid 10 minutes of that to make it tighter, and it would have made the movie that much better. Also, the forced romance, if you can even call it that, was kind of frustrating because it never led anywhere. Joey and Rickles was so unnecessary. Like, Rickles died so early on that it just felt like, what was the point of showing us that if it wasn't gonna lead anywhere and it was gonna be cut short super fast? At that point, Sammy and Peter had a much better thing going on, where there was actual chemistry between the two characters, and there was many cute moments where, for example, there's like this scene they're all going up the stairs, and you see that Sammy automatically grabs hold of Peter because she feels safe with him. It just felt more organic, and it would have been more believable if it had led to anything towards the end. Dan Stevens' character was so engaging throughout like 90% of the movie, but in the moment that he turned, his motives seemed so hammered in, and his abrupt change in nature to go into full-on psychopath is such a splash of cold water that honestly it felt like I missed a scene or something. As well as Abigail being this all-powerful and unstoppable force who, as we're told, is centuries old and has experienced killing, but all of a sudden when Frank turns into a vampire, she is powerless to stop him in every duel. Also, in that same vein, I felt like there was other scenes missed as well, because out of nowhere, Abigail just randomly decides to care about Joey. There's even this scene towards the end where Abigail and Joey are in the forefront of a shot, and in the background there's a statue of a mother and her daughter, I guess. And I guess as the audience we're supposed to see the resemblance and symbolism, but it felt just so tacked on in the end. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that felt Lazar, Abigail's dad, way too late to be introduced as a character. I just didn't see what he added to the story. Like, this story was perfectly fine without him in it. All in all, I really enjoyed this movie because of how joyful it was, and the highs were high, but unfortunately the third act really hurt the movie for me. So yeah, while I can't say I loved this movie, I still had a fun time with it, and I'm still really excited for anything that Radio Silence has coming next. And despite my gripes with the movie, I still hope the movie does really well. But my name's Anthony. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.